has to end by June 27th, which is like ridiculously close. We are backed up with legislation, for different parts of the session at different times. Both the Senate and House refused to suspend the rules to allow and required readings of the bills. We're last couple of days we haven't done that, but we have mostly the last couple of weeks, and that makes for a big backup of legislation and probably a less productive session than we would have liked, but we're still going after the big pieces. I would mention among those the wildfire bill, which I talk to you about every chance I get. That's Senate Bill 762. It appears to have a very good path. Last week, we came to complete agreement with House Democrats on a whole bunch of details. There's another amendment package coming out tomorrow, but I'm very confident of its passage. It is an historic bill. I worked hard on it, but more to the point, hundreds of people have worked hard on it over years to get us to where we are now. I understand you probably saw the first significant fire of the season down in Klamath, still going on right now. I'm in a lovely 80 something degrees in Salem, but I think you're in 100 degrees plus down there. It's going to be more like that. It's just probably a grim season coming up. And, my feeling is on this one, could we stop quibbling between parties and have a really strong affirmative vote? Because it's going to require most Oregonians, lots of Oregonians, to do things somewhat differently than we have. And, there continue to be concerns that we have a top-down approach that won't take into account what private sector interests need, especially development and real estate related interests, and what local governments want. One size fits all approach. That is a bum rap, I think, on this bill. But the bottom line is that in the end, it is based on state authority for what is going to be permitted in extreme wildfire risk areas. We've tried to build in so much opportunity for public comment on rulemaking and public input. And, it's just going to be kind of impossible for the state to steamroll over what local governments want. But we are,
Yes.
the phrase existential crisis is overused, but that's what we got here. And it calls for extraordinary unity. So I'm continuing to talk mostly with Republicans now and talking with people who Republicans listen to more than they listen to me, to say, let's get this going. Let's do this now. And there's plenty of chance for course correction. This is a really complex program. We're not going to implement it perfectly. It's going to need course correction. We got the mechanisms built in the bill to do that. And I'm hopeful. But like I said, really like a bipartisan bill out of the deal. Interestingly, I got a call from the Jackson County Commissioners today on Senate Bill 391. That's the bill that allows counties to let an ADU, an auxiliary dwelling unit, a mother-in-law, whatever you want to call it, be constructed on rural residential lots of 2 acres or more, in response to the wildfire and the housing shortage. Some of the land use groups in the past were not really open to that, thinking it would be a contributor to sprawl, but everybody sees the need now, and it's been, fairly easy to get it going. What's interesting is that the county commissioners asked me, we've passed it on the Senate side, but it's over in the House. They asked if I would advocate in the House for an amendment that says not that counties may do that, but they shall do that, make it mandatory that they do that. And that's the first call I can remember from a county government saying, would you please make this permissive law that allows us to do things a mandatory law? And I think that their thinking is they'd really like to grant these dwellings, these units, and they don't really want to face angry neighborhoods, rural neighborhoods, and have a contentious land use hearing each time they do it. So they want to point to the state and say, they made us do it. So and I had another call at the Association of Oregon Counties to see what they want. And it has struck me that, there's a lot of talk about local control. I think local control is important, but it is the fact that a lot of local governments don't want certain kinds of local control because it's tough decisions. The one that comes up for me is 554, which the really controversial gun bill. And it's not what we ended up passing, but in its earlier version, it allowed local governments to have the authority to restrict and regulate gun use in their public buildings. So a city could make a decision on a city hall, county and a county courthouse, so forth, the library. And almost unanimously, local governments said opposed that and said, we don't want that authority. That's a hot potato that we don't need, thanks. So the local authority, the desire for local authority by local governments seems to only go so far. House Bill 2002 is kind of the main, there are a number of policing bills and kind of social and racial equity bills. It's probably, when it comes to policing, the most inclusive. And it's got a lot of support and it has a lot of parts to it, most of which I'm not going to say are uncontroversial, but certainly I don't have any trouble with at all about the need for more training and what different minorities and cultures or what kind of policing is appropriate, and money for restorative justice, which I'm thrilled about because groups like Resolve and Medford and others around the state are doing fantastic work, especially with kids around restorative justice, but they need more resources. But the part of 2002 that is somewhat controversial and is a little bit of a difficulty for me because of our local law enforcement's attitude has to do with police practices. So the ability of police to stop someone for a broken tail light or that kind of thing, other kinds of things that in some environments have led to really difficult situations. The objective of that part of the bill is to reduce unnecessary or unproductive contact between police and communities, especially minority communities. And our law enforcement in Jackson County have been very clear that they'd like me to oppose the bill. They feel like it's micromanaging and taking tools away from them in the field that can be appropriate for public safety. And I'm struggling a little bit with it. I for the most part, maybe some of you have had more experience, but my experience with local law enforcement, the Jackson County sheriffs and the city police has been positive for the most part. I'm sure it's not perfect. I'm not a minority. I'm a white man, so I'm quite clear others may have experienced other things, but and there have been incidents. Their record is not perfect, but the best I can tell, they are working to improve and have some realization that there's more to racism than just overt, George Floyd stuff, that racism and racist enforcement can be more subtle than that, more implicit than that. And so when they say, please don't support this, I have to think hard about it and about that part of the bill. And I'm asking them to be more specific with me about just exactly, if this bill passes, what is the damage from your perspective? How is your toolbox in law enforcement really weakened? So to be determined on that one for me. I got a couple of emails recently. I've had a lot over time about cannabis, about hemp and pot and the whole cluster of problems. And some of the emails are desperate for help. I guess it depends on where you live. I know there are increasing water issues, and a lot of my wife actually works in Siskiyou County across the border, and maybe not too far from a shooting war over there about farmers pumping their wells as hard as they can into tankers to truck water to the hemp growers and the marijuana growers. There's that. There's talk about armed gangs out in the backcountry. People really kind of scared in rural areas. There is really serious problems, and there's a cluster, basically 3 hemp-related bills up. Actually, tomorrow on the Senate floor, I'm carrying House Bill 2284 to create a hemp commission. Most of our agricultural commissions are about promoting whatever the crop is. There's wine, grapes, different kinds of things. There's beef, dairy, and this would have heavier duty than that to try to figure out some of these problems. It's pretty serious. We got some serious problems that are resistant to easy solutions. Senate bill or House Bill 3000 is an important bill, and it's getting more provisions that have a lot to do with involvement of law enforcement to inspect some of the hemp areas where apparently there's a lot of illicit THC pot cultivation going on within the hemp. And of course, we've got a legal THC, pot industry and a black market as well. And the licensed growers are feeling like they can't compete with the black market folks who don't have the inspections or the costs. And again, there's at least allegations of gang activity in the woods, which I don't know firsthand, but I'm hearing about them. So there's kind of a higher level of tolerance of having law enforcement get out there and help the Department of Agriculture on some of this enforcement. And I'm kind of persuaded that it's time to move in that direction. And then there's more reporting requirements of hemp growers and more testing requirements to see how much of this hemp is THC pot and is it being grown legally. So there's a fast attempt to get our arms around this, and it's going to be costly and difficult. We have this explosion of this. Now we've got this mixed legal and illegal market and a lot of money at stake, and kind of the problems that go along with all that. We have a big fight going on about wake surfing on the Willamette River. Do you folks know wake surfing? I don't know of any on the Rogue, or we know jet boats on the Rogue, and they can create a pretty big wake. But I think these are bigger boats up. There's a place called Newburgh Pool, a bit south of Portland. Oh, and this wake surfing has been banned in a lot of Portland. But there are these boats, I guess, more powerful even than the Rogue jet boats that create big waves, and it's a growing sport. And the environmental community has been against it for years because of the impact it has on the banks, the amount of erosion it does to the banks and the sediment and the effect on fish. And there's just a ridiculous amount of mail about whether to ban it or not. One senator's getting in hot water because it's his take-home piece. It's his big bill, and it just happens that he lives on the Willamette on that stretch. And there's a growing, I guess, sports industry and outfitters who are outraged at doing it. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of the coyote killing contest bill, the bill to ban coyote killing contest in Southeast Oregon that we passed through the Senate in 2019 and didn't make it. It didn't make it last year. It was approved in the House this year, but on our side, and I hear from some of you, or for some folks, please pass this bill and get rid of these coyote killing contests. And I may have spoken to you folks about this before. It's not happening this session. And the reason is that leadership correctly assesses that it's so explosive. We're talking about, I think there are 2 or 3 of these contests a year, and maybe a very few hundred people involved with it. And this does nothing to any other hunting or coyote regulation or anything else. It's just there was interest in banning it because the whole point of it is amount of death, how many animals you can kill. And a lot of people think there's a public interest in not doing that in Oregon. But what happened was it became kind of the culture war bill of 2019 and so infuriated the other side because they really thought their way of life or their attitudes or their values were being really insulted. And some of the rhetoric about how, moronic or savage it was to do this was really offensive to them. And our leadership this year said, you know what, we've got so many moving parts and this baseline anger that the building's not open to the public anyway. Could we kind of not do that this session as well? That was a culture war bill of 2019. In a way, smaller way, this wave surfing thing is the culture war bill of this session. I think I mentioned last time that we had passed a motorcycle lane splitting bill that allows motorcyclists to ride their bikes in between lanes of traffic if the traffic's moving it was less than 4 or 5 miles an hour and the motorcyclist is moving less than 10 miles per hour. And that, a lot of people just flinched at the thought of that. I was kind of one of them because I'm when you're in LA or the Bay Area and you see people doing that in slow traffic, you just, at least if you can get as spaced out about your blind spot as I can, that looks really dangerous. And actually the Senate president made his most passionate speech of the session so far in opposition to it. And I started out opposed, and then I looked at studies from the state police and others, and the data seems pretty clear that there is more injury and death for motorcyclists if you don't let them lane split from rear ending, mostly from hitting them straight on, than in this lane splitting. And when I saw that, I voted for it. But the governor issued her first veto. She vetoed her first bill this year, the lane splitting bill. And COVID, of course, there continues to be a lot of unhappiness and dissatisfaction with the way we're managing COVID. And part of it, a big part of it, is just how long it's been. People are just done with this. And I think there was a major expectation that when lots of people were vaccinated, we'd really open up fast and pretty completely. And the governor's still saying that's exactly what we'll do if we hit 70% vaccination rates statewide. Of course, we are somewhere in the 50% range statewide. And those are the people who wanted to get vaccinated or were very open to it. And the folks who left, or at least who aren't vaccinated, are by definition those who've been more resistant to it. So I think it's hard to see how we get to 70%. And that's been the benchmark. And I think people who were fully vaccinated did not expect to still have to have these kinds of restrictions, especially masking. So, I've been struck, I think maybe we talked about this last time. I've been struck with the difference in the character of the mail I get who want something different in COVID management. 6 months ago, it was people who were really zealous and in many cases, in my opinion, not well grounded in the science and not really caring much about the science. That's an overgeneralization. And more and more, that has spread now, and more groups, certainly the business community, has said this just isn't working, what we're doing now. And, this business where, the governor came up with something that was, I think, unique nationally. I don't think any other state's doing it, which is, this sort of choice that she's given to businesses, indoor businesses and restaurants and whatnot, where indoors at anyway, either you require masking completely, which, lets store owners and their staff deal with the anger of people who've been vaccinated and don't want to mask anymore, or you check vaccination status at the door and only let vaccinated people come in unmasked. Well, that doesn't work, and it makes store staff do things they don't know how to do, and exposes them to some of the angriest folks around. So that just doesn't work. And I think this, leadership kind of knows that, but is really banking on being able to get to that vaccination rate very soon and reopen. I hope I'm wrong and we get there, but if I'm not wrong, we need to change the way we're regulating things. I don't see this as very sustainable. If you have opinions, I'd like to hear them. I could stop there for now and see what's on your mind. What is on your mind?
So it looks like two of you have unmuted yourselves. Ron, I think you were first if you wanted to respond to that. We also have a pre-submitted question to ask, but if you'd like to respond to Senator Golden's question, you can go ahead, Ron.
Okay, I was wondering what the status on HB 2021 is.
That is the 100% clean bill. It has not passed the House yet. And I think it's sitting on the speaker's desk waiting to, I don't know if Andrew, you could look at the overview and see if it's scheduled or not. That has had more pushback than we anticipated, and a whole bunch of amendments. And I think it has the votes in the House. I think it'll pass in its current form. It's fairly complex, but it is I think a sound roadmap to get us to carbon-free electricity grid by 2040 with big steps in 2030 and 2035, which I like. I think that's a good thing.
Just really quickly, HB 2021 is in Ways and Means.
Oh, okay. So it passed through committees to Ways and Means, and then it would not come to a Senate committee. It would go from Ways and Means to both chambers. And I think my caucus, Senate Democrats, are pretty well committed to it. It has a price tag, which I can't tell you, but it's not small. It's a big chunk for electrification of the vehicle fleet and charging infrastructure.
Thank you, Ron. Jim, I saw that you unmuted yourself. If you'd like to ask a question.
Yeah, Jeff, I think we've met. I'm on the Medford School Board. And,
Right.
Suzanne's here, also member. Last meeting, we had about 5 or 6 letters come in about masks for the kids. And, the data that I've seen, and I've read, I don't know, 20 different things, but for the kids, it is really not, the COVID is really not a issue. And yet we've had over the summer or this last year, we've had time after time after time, people talking about the kids having all kinds of difficult problems psychologically, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so the force seems to be now to get masks off, and nobody is worried about the rest of this year. But I think if we keep making some progress, I think we're going to see a real strong push by a lot of people about no masks in the schools. And we're going to be talking about it probably Thursday. I don't know how the board's going to, where the board's going to be on it, but we're getting pretty hard letters coming in, and the science seems to back them up. So I just throw that out as a seed for you to think about, but I think we're going to see this all across the state, quite frankly.
And you are especially talking about the opening of the new school year. Yeah.
Yes, right. In
And
the
you're-
fall,
and you're-
right. That's right.
Your intention is
Yeah.
100% in-person learning for the new school year. Is that what you're planning for?
Well,
We're there
we'll
now.
have online available. So people that really have a problem will have an alternative, and of course they have Logos, which is at home, so that everybody has an opportunity. But the rest of it probably is just my guess is be real hard pushed to get in face-to-face learning, and it's really not a medical risk, and it has so many other positive things. We'll see what the board says. I don't know what they'll say on Thursday, but that's sort of the leaning of the letters that we've been hearing.
Hey, Jeff, we're already open 5 days a week for all schools. We're the largest state school system in Oregon, 5 days a week. We opened April 17th.
And do you still have kids remote, choosing to be remote?
Yes, we do. We opened a school called Medford Online Academy. So we have about 1,000 students in there, and we have about 12,000 attending the schools.
Okay.
So we
So
are
you-
full on, hands-on, everybody. And right now with the new mandate, you have to wear a mask in the school and you don't wear a mask outside, but you still have to socially distance. Because we can't be the mask police to students. That creates a whole hierarchy issue between haves and have-nots, and you got it and you didn't. And people are solidifying into their I am or I'm not period. And the new directive just pissed people off. That's all I can say.
So what's your thought on masks, Suzanne? Essential to be without them in the fall, or?
Yes,
Yeah,
for our students, yes.
yeah.
That would be the goal, is for them not to have to wear one. We're the toughest state on mask wearing for students in schools. It's tough. It's hot. It's summer. We're going to be doing summer school. So we're going to be doing 4 2-week programs of school throughout the entire summer. And if they're inside, the kids have to wear a mask on a 100-degree day like today. And they're having to wear them. And the teachers and staff are having to wear them. Now the state did a great job at allowing all the teachers and the classified workers to get in the front of the line and get vaccinated. So they had those options. So all of our staff is taken care of, which means our students should be able to attend school in a way that's safe for them mentally and socially and educationally.
I'm really,
Tough.
this feeling about this, I think, is stronger in our part of the state than it is upstate. But I think slowly, really, there's a consensus is growing about this, about schools and about this issue particularly. And I feel really uncomfortable trying to arbitrate between the conflicting links I get about the science on masking and every place else. And I really don't think it's productive to undermine the governor's decisions on this. It's very easy. The COVID car is really easy to drive from the back seat and really hard when your hands are on the wheels. So I'm really wary of that. But what you and Jim have to say just makes a lot of sense to me. And I think we need to keep watching other states. And if their record on transmission and severity is as good or better than ours, I don't see how we can keep being the outlier on this.
Yeah, California is going to be wide open on June 15th. 0 masks, 0 social distancing, none at school, wide open. Idaho's wide open. All the areas around us are wide open. So when we look at that, it makes it really tough. And our COVID numbers keep going down and down and down, yet we're staying in this super strict run. I'm not trying to negotiate back on what our governor's decided. I'm just saying the way it's working to push that on businesses. Businesses are not happy. They are not happy people.
Yeah.
It's tough with me and my daughter. We're vaccinated. My husband and son aren't. We go to a store and it's like, do I wear one? Do I not wear one? I don't know. I'm confused. And so you have this whole gambit of, is it safe here or not? And then people look at you. So you have a whole dynamic of interesting things, especially in Southern Oregon, where you have a very diverse, great population, which makes great conversations, makes great for politics, makes great for us because we all look at all the different sides before we get to an end. But it's tough. But our goal right now is to work for students in the fall so that they're not wearing a mask in full day school.
Okay.
Yep.
That's our
I think
next.
that's a kind of a doable thing. And I think unless there's some big flare up or some, medical emergency that throws us way off the tracks, you're going to have a heck of a lot of mamas and dadas wondering about what the heck are we doing. And we'll see. The board's going to talk about it tomorrow. I don't know what we'll do. We may end up generating a letter or something to the governor or to whomever is the right person, but I can't say that at this point. We have to talk about it. But Suzanne's got it. She's got it figured out. I think that's what we're hearing.
I'm glad I found the.
I can't hear
We
you.
can't hear you, Senator Golden. Nope.
And it was good too.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hear me now? I was saying I'm glad I found the person who's figured COVID out.
I haven't figured it out. I got angry parents. I've tried to work with them. That's what I get a lot of because I still have students in the school. It really affects my house, my students, my kids. I got college, high school, the whole gambit. And so I understand where they're coming from. And so I get them everywhere I go. If I go to Costco, someone's stopping me. I go to Target, someone's stopping me. So you have those conversations for both sides. I have not seen one of or of keeping masks on students. I haven't heard that one from anyone I've met anywhere yet.
Yeah, yeah. And
And
I'd
I know we
really,
need to keep
this
staff
is,
fit too.
and this continues to divide us in,
Yeah.
you know, when we need something different than being divided. Yeah. Okay, thanks. I think this feeling's going to become more bipartisan, and it seems to me, I don't know if I'll call it the lowest hanging fruit, but masking kids in school, given what seems to be the consensus about how relatively little they transmit and how relatively mild or asymptomatic their cases are, and sort of the mental burden they've carried for over a year now. That seems like it should be a relatively easy one. Knock on something.
Great. We have one pre-submitted question. We have two, sorry. I'll ask one now. And if anyone would like to use the raise hand function, we can start a line of other people that would like to ask questions.
Okay, good.
So this question comes from Jennifer, and she asks, what can be done immediately to help prevent successful businesses that do have the business lined up, but are struggling to retain and find employees? How can we help them from going under?
Boy, I wish I had a good answer to that. I think it is the difficulty I'm hearing most about these days. Finding work, finding workers. And it appears to be, people have different theories, but it appears to be some combination of the premium on unemployment payments that the federal government has put forward, which, you know, I always seemed a little peculiar to me compared to other places that assistance could have gone. But that's part of it. And employers tell me all the time that they hear from people who say, you know, unless you can substantially raise wages, I mean, way up there, I'd rather stay home. That lasts till September. Some states have turned it down. Some governors have turned it down. I think about a dozen now or so. I don't think Oregon's going to do that. And I think, you know, in some of the sectors where the employment, you know, where it's really hard to find people, they are some of the service sectors with the lowest wages. So maybe, you know, we need to take another look at wage structures for that. But that's not always the case. I was touring a really fascinating mill a little east of Salem last week with mass timber manufacturer, and his bottleneck, he's got customers all over the world now, and he can't produce what he needs to. And he says it's employment, and he claims he's starting his people at $20 an hour with a very full load of benefits, and he still can't find people. So that's part of it. I am hearing in the Rogue Valley about the difficulty of finding people who passed marijuana drug testing, which is somewhat distressing. And then there's the wages that get paid under the table in the hemp and pod industry, which, you know, these are more Jackson, Josephine County problems than elsewhere. So that's a pretty big triple hit right there. And I don't know a short-term solution. I think we've got, you know, longer term, I think this relates to social justice and access to education, community college, technical education, that kind of thing. But that's not the whole of it. And I don't know if this is straying as a Democrat, but I don't, I wanted people displaced by COVID, people who couldn't work because of COVID for various reasons, to be fully reimbursed with uninsurance benefits. Having that premium this long isn't where I would have invested that money. And I think that can be overstated, this idea that, working people are just lazy and they're sitting home watching Jeopardy reruns and enjoying all their money. I don't think that's what's happening, but I think there's some disincentive, and that's part of it. So I'm not giving this constituent a very good answer, Sarah. I don't know the short-term solution and or a legislative approach to it. And if anybody does, I'm all ears. We have some big structural issues about work and the way people are going to support themselves that are bigger than COVID, bigger than our current situation. I credit Andrew Yang in the presidential race with daring to go there some. I mean, we have an economic shift such that, without major changes in direction, people are not going to be incentivized to work and are going to have difficulty finding family wage employment.
Great. We do have a question from Wes in the chat. What bills are important to you that may die for lack of time?
Boy, what a good, the bill that I think is really important, it's been carried several sessions. I carried it this year and it needs to keep going, has to do with the home interest, the home mortgage interest deduction. And it is one that the realtors just go at with pitchforks whenever it comes up. The one this session, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the bill number, maybe Andrew will be fast enough on it. But the one this session said, the deduction on mortgage interest is unchanged at the federal level, and that's a lot bigger than anything the state does. On the state level, we would have ended the interest deduction on everything but primary residences. If you had multiple homes, second, third, or fourth home, you wouldn't be able to deduct your mortgage interest from your Oregon income tax. And on your primary home, you wouldn't be able to do it if your taxable income was over $250,000. Under that, or under 200,000, it would have been the same as always. And that would produce in the neighborhood of $200 million of revenue for the state. And all of that would go to housing programs, to the variety of housing programs trying to get people into home ownership, all the way down to emergency shelters. And, even though it hasn't gotten quite as much attention this session, homelessness and marginal housing insecurity, I think, is at the center of so many of our social ills and so much of our state spending. If you don't have a home, you're just not going to keep it together. And that's going to hit all kinds of places where, whether you're compassionate about it or not, are going to be real expensive for us as taxpayers. So, my feeling is you've got between 150 and $200 million on the table. It's a subsidy for housing and homelessness. Should it go to people for multiple homes or to people with incomes over 250,000, or should those public dollars try to take a real crack at homelessness and marginal housing? And I know the realtors are angry about it. Others are too. We get a fair bit of email. People, kind of middle-class people, look at the home interest deduction and go, hey, that's the one tax break that's available to us. We're not, the rest are for very wealthy people. Don't do anything to that. And I get that. But then I got to ask, what do we do about homelessness and marginal housing? And the hemorrhage it's going to be on public resources going forward, and the kids who are trying to grow up on the streets and what happens with them. So I'm really hoping there can be a change in that conversation going forward. There's not the critical mass to get it done this session. That's one that comes to mind.
Great. Thank you for that question. As a reminder, if you'd like to use the raise hand function, you can get in line to ask a question, or you can physically raise your hand and I'll make a mental note of it. I do see that Ron has his hand up. If you'd like to ask a question, Ron, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Well, you were already starting to talk about it quite a bit, the question of homelessness. Is there anything on the docket this year to really address that issue?
Well, and interestingly, we're trying, I always mention the big wildfire omnibus bill. We have a separate bill that is the wildfire recovery bill from the 2020 wildfires. And in its draft form, it has $300 million for housing. And some of that would go to purchasing property that some of the trailer parks and mobile home parks that burned along the Highway 99 corridor and other places. And part of it, there are all kinds of really interesting plans for small, efficient homes that people could get into as owners, and the loans that could be temporary, sort of subsidized on a revolving loan basis. So the people would be buying their own homes, but you'd flatten out the hump to home ownership. So that's one thing. And there's, they're ongoing. It's a major priority of the speakers in the Portland area. So it's continuing. And, it's a national crisis, and we're going to put significant money into it. And yes, short answer is yes, there are things that are going on. I do want to mention one thing I forgot, and that's campaign finance reform. You keep hearing me talk about that as well. There was a real breakthrough. In fact, today there was a hearing in House Rules. I may have mentioned I have a bill that I'm excited about, Senate Bill 336, for limiting campaign contributions. And it's been kind of duking it out with a bill that had more momentum in the House that I won't go into it now, but it doesn't, in my view, represent real reform. It still allows huge contributions from interested groups. Well, for now, that bill's been dropped, and the new bill is a public match small donor bill that for small donations would match small donations 6-to-1 up to a certain limit, and really give access to people who haven't had access to politics before. It would end large donations and really give rise to a lot of small donations. And I know there's pushback. I know there's a lot of people who just can't bring themselves right now to support the notion of using tax dollars for campaigns. I've heard people say, you're going to take my tax dollar and give it to some politician I can't stand? Really? Is that the way it works? And I do get that. But you look around the world at, where corruption thrives and where special interests really run the show in state and national capitals. And there's systems like ours, and those countries that have public financing don't have the kind of graft and corruption that other countries do. So that really, if you think about the kind of waste in some government spending that comes about because of the power of certain lobbies, in the long run, I think you're saving money by publicly financing campaigns and electing people who are not beholden to major interests. And my feeling about it is whoever finances elections is going to own the system, and that ought to be us. So I realize it's controversial. It's not a done deal, but it's a change in direction that I think is a pretty interesting one.
Do you happen to know the number for that?
2680-12. Just introduced today. And in fact, that's the meeting I need to go to in 11 minutes. Let me see what I haven't covered.
Yeah, we do have a question from Anne.
Okay.
Anne, if you'd like to unmute yourself, you can ask a question.
Hello, I am in my
Hi.
car. Hello, Senator Golden. I'm wondering how things are moving with Senate Bill 755, the Addiction Treatment and Recovery Act.
I don't know, but I'll find out and get back to you. Sarah or Andrew, either of you have a beat on that?
It's in Ways and Means right now.
Yeah, I don't know its momentum.
Okay,
Well,
thank you.
but if we have your email, I'd love to get back to you on it.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. If you wanted to message Andrew your email, we can get back to you on that. Does anyone else have any questions? You can raise your hand either with the raise hand function or physically. We do have another question in the chat from Wes, and he was wanting an update on, update on the timber issues.
So,
The salvage timber problem. They're
Oh,
taking
thank-
advantage.
yeah.
Thank you for the
Yeah.
clarification.
yeah, I'll say generally on timber issues is they haven't met the expectations that were raised this session. And there are a couple things. One is several of the timber companies lost a lot of value in the wildfires. That was different depending on, what kind of company, but it's not a great year to ask more of them. And we need more participation in our wildfire program from them. And the other thing is there's a very interesting, you may know, there's a mediation going on this year between a delegation of the timber industry and forest conservationists to try to come to agreements on forest practices and, buffers around streams and wildlife habitat, a whole number of issues that have been, part of the timber wars. And, a year, 2 years ago, a year ago, they looked at each other and said, we're both about to spend millions of dollars on ballot measures. What if we spend a year trying to sit down and see what we can do? So they're doing that now, and that has delayed timber policy debates. We're trying to see what they can figure out by agreement first. The Wes is referring to the flap over the removal of so-called hazard trees from the fires, which are supposed to be within within a corridor along highways that is twice as high as the dead tree is, basically, to protect people from falling timber. And it's been this tree removal program marked first 300,000 trees. And then that got downsized after there was a lot of attention about marking live trees and whatnot to 140,000 trees. And now there's, I think, 50,000 cut. And we had a couple hearings from people who had worked on it saying the cuts were going way beyond what had been marked and what had been decided. Now, some people are for that, to be frank. They say, if a tree is charred, let's take it because it might be dead, and let's take it to the mills and mill it and bring down the instead of paying $10 for a stud at Home Depot anymore, let's increase the timber supply. That's actually not how it works, and there's not really a linkage there, but I understand that. And of course, there are people who believe that we ought to be salvaging a lot more timber. And that, I'll have that discussion. I find that a fascinating discussion. But you shouldn't take a program, especially when FEMA draws the rules and say, we'll reimburse the state for this if you follow the rules, and then break the rules and say, well, gosh, it's kind of black, looks like it might be dead. That's not how it works. And so we're going to get another report from ODOT, which is running the program. and have in the independent uh, sort of investigator that's on the ground to find out what's going on. My view is that ODOT, you hear charges of corruption at ODOT and whatnot. I don't think any of that's happening. I do know that this project they were handed is unlike any that any state agencies ever had to do. And they were told to do it really fast. And they've got this network, this snarl of a dozen different contractors. It's impossible to know who's reporting to who. And I think they've had a contract management program. And my goal is a good, transparent analysis so that nothing like this happens again, because we're going to have more wildfires. And I frankly do not give the state very good marks on coming clean with the public when there's been a big snafu. You may remember the hundreds of millions we lost on the computerization of Medicare expansion, the so-called Oracle debacle. And there's still, in my mind, not an adequate explanation of what happened there. So there's a little bit, in my view, too much CYA in the past when we make a big mistake. And as you know, naturally, you lose public trust when you do that. So my sense is, if you come clean, some people are going to hit you over the head with it. But in the long run, public trust is going to be in better shape than it is now. And I hope we can follow that principle when it comes to this issue.
And we'll
Peggy.
give the last question to Peggy.
So thank you. I have been quietly listening and making notes and sending comments to Andrew. I just wanted to make a couple of quick questions or quick comments around the housing issue, because it is so important and the homelessness is so important. It's my understanding that there is a bill, House Bill 2004, that will be heard in a subcommittee in Ways and Means this week that will provide $2.5 million for the city of Medford to create a 7 days a week shelter navigation center. So that's really going to be exciting for that. There are a few other cities in the state that are going to get that. The other thing I wanted to share is that about 50% of the units needed around Oregon are for people who have 50% or less AMI, median income. And so we all need to face and recognize that. So I'm hopeful that besides the 300 million that the senator was talking about, Speaker Kotek is actually talking about the possibility of up to $1 billion worth of investment in housing this for the session.
I thought it was over more time than that, but let me, as long as you're talking budget, let me just real quickly talk a little bit about budget asks. We're now, policy bills are getting settled now, and the rest of the session is a scramble for money, basically, which is different, a little crazier this year because of the ARPA money mixed in, and a big chunk is going to go to wildfire recovery. But there's what you call the Christmas tree bill at the end of the session, and we don't know how big that is because there's a difference of opinion about how much we should be putting in reserve and preparing for what could be super difficult biennia without federal assistance. But there are three budget bills or three areas where I'm going to be working for funds. One is for the Phoenix Public Safety Center. Phoenix has been struggling for a long time. They have their police are in this old, very funky trailer, really an inadequate facility. They lost part of their Station 3 of their fire district in the fire. And they've had a plan for a while for a combined public safety and city hall center. They've got the blueprints, they're ready to go. They only need about $12.5 million. So we're going to get some, maybe 2 or 3 in the wildfire recovery bill. But Pam Marsh and I are going to be lobbying for the rest to try to get them that center. They need a turbocharge of some kind in Phoenix. You look at their tax base and they have some of the lower income people in the valley, and right split by 99 like that. They've got problems that cities situated like that have more and more these days. Medford, as you probably know, has this very ambitious indoor sports and aquatic center that they out by the West Howard Park on, is it Ross Lane, I guess. And it's they've been planning it for a long time, raising a lot of money. I guess you voted for the transient lodging tax to go there, and really put together $60 million. And now, because of the cost of materials, it's going to cost another $5 million. And we're going to try and get that to complete that center. And SOU has several asks that they really need. I really think statewide we are dropping the ball on higher ed and community colleges. And SOU had was approved last session before the session died for, I think, $3 million to demolish the Green Springs dorms, which are in the way of what they need there. You can't bond that. Other universities can get bonding for their construction needs, but you can't bond demolition. So we're trying to help them with that. And they've got this really interesting concept about a creative industry building that kind of combines all the sort of media and fine arts things they're doing. And they need, if they're going to survive, they need to be the magnet of the whole higher ed system in a particular area. And that's the obvious one, given the head start they have. And we want to help make them more self-sufficient. There's a long set of structural reasons that SOU struggles, even though they've cut a lot of stuff to the bone, and I think are really competent folks. But colleges and universities their size are really struggling nationally right now. So anyway, I'm going to be out there with my hand outstretched like everybody else towards the end of the session. I really want to thank you. I know several of you have come to several of these. And like I say, I really like hearing from you. Please keep communicating. We'll try to do that. We'll try to keep putting the newsletter out. If you're not getting the newsletter, just go to the legislative website. Easiest thing is to, put that in chat too as well, if you would, Sarah, and you can sign up there. Trying to do it weekly or close to it. And in the interim, I'm not sure what, but there's a lot of things I want to probe and set up for the next short session. And if this turns out to be my one term, I got a lot of unfinished business I want to do. Thank you. Thank you all so much. It really, the support feels great. The interest feels great. And thanks to both Andrew and Sarah, and a special shout out to Sarah, who puts the newsletter together each week really well. And Andrew's keeping the ship going up here. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff, Andrew, and Sarah. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Everyone.